Okay, good evening. The board has been in closed session since 6 o'clock. There are 5 board members present, 2 absent. We had 2 agenda items for closed session. The first was the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body. And 2, collective negotiation matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for 1 or more classes of employees. Could we rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next on the agenda is public comments. We have one name so far for public comments, Mimi Black, and we ask that you speak for up to 3 minutes, and the board doesn't answer, but we definitely get back to the public speakers. Thank you. Yeah.
Malia. Thank you very much. My name is indeed Mimi Black. I belong to a middle schooler at Bryan and a sophomore at York. And because I do not have a student at Sandburg, I don't have any personal high-stakes agenda in talking with you this evening about parent-teacher conferences at Sandburg. I'm here because, just like you, I believe in what is going right in this district, and I would like to be able to celebrate that and to help in my one-step removed parent perspective in what might be helpful moving forward. As you are well familiar with the research, one of the greatest drivers of success of students in a district is parent involvement. And as part of that initiative, I believe that one of the sterling features of District 205 is that it has always institutionally sanctioned, celebrated, and supported the collaboration between parents and teachers as part of the three-legged stool that is often talked about, where our students are best supported when there is support between parents, administrators, and teachers, all 3 of them working in concert to well support our students. When I heard that student-led conferences were at Sandburg, I said, oh, that is awesome. My doctoral as well as my postdoctoral research is in children's intrinsic motivation in the classroom. So I'm well familiar with the research that shows that when students are encouraged to take ownership over their learning and they're encouraged to be agents of their own learning, it can enhance their learning. I understand why this initiative is perceived to be a positive one, and there is research behind it. What I would humbly ask the board to please do is, whenever the board is considering an initiative, is as it is implemented, what is shown in the research to be efficacious. It is my understanding that as it is implemented at Sandburg, they are student presentations, not conferences, student presentations at the expense of parent-teacher conferences. And I would like to ask the board to please look at the research and see whether indeed student-led conferences are student presentations at the expense of parent-teacher conferences. I believe that whenever you begin to file away or saw away at one of those legs that's been shown to be of great support to our students, you might jeopardize the stability of the stool itself. I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, and I'd be happy to speak with any of you individually. Thank you for your time. Happy Valentine's Day.
Are there other public comments for tonight? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to reports and presentations. We have 2 Shining Star recognitions. Thank you.
It is with great honor to recognize our staff, in particular, Donna Lynch. Have you stand up here? Donna? In the middle? Yes, absolutely. Donna Lynch was recommended or nominated by David Beatty. And Donna is a math and science materials manager for the district. And she exemplifies initiative and hard work with every goal she accomplishes. She's the first one to volunteer when a new project needs support, specifically with the adoption of the new ELA materials and the Eureka Math Pilot. She has taken on a leadership role in the warehouse to ensure that the materials are moved to the schools and into the students' hands as quickly and efficiently as possible. She listens to the teachers and makes sure they have the science and mathematics tools and resources they need consistently throughout the year. She's efficient in her work, consistently learning how to do tasks more quickly and effectively. She truly is a shining star. So congratulations, Donna. Thank you.
And we have another shining star that's been recognized. Vicki Calnant, she in the audience? Oh, well, she's not here, but I am still going to read what was stated about her in her nomination. She was nominated by Darwin Strelo, Kim Thompson, and Sharon Emmy Ivanelli. Vicki is dedicated to serving the students at Conrad Fisher and spreads her joy of learning throughout the building. When the staff watches Vicki work with children from grades K to 5, she is always enthusiastic, joyful, and focused on student learning. The positive climate she sets is definitely contagious. She goes above and beyond every day as she seeks out ways to help the teachers and students. There is never downtime for Vicki. She begins early with the breakfast program and then proceeds to fill her day with personal connections and meaningful learning opportunities for students. She is truly a remarkable person and a staff member. And let's give Vicki, even though she's not here, a warm welcome and thank you.
We'll move to instructional rounds. Mary Baum.
We've talked about this before a little bit in some of our presentations, so we want to give you a little bit better understanding of what we're doing. So we have our middle school and our high school principals here who have been working together on their instructional rounds, along with Mary, and they will give you hopefully an interesting, a little bit deeper understanding of what it is they do and what this means.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. So we are going to present a little bit on instructional rounds, and I'd like to start with the rationale of why an organization might conduct instructional rounds. So from some of the experts in instructional rounds, they share from their research that one of the greatest barriers to school improvement is the lack of an agreed upon definition of what high quality instruction looks like. And for us as an EC12 system, that's particularly important as we look to become more systematic in how we deliver instruction. Our student achievement objectives address rigor and student engagement, as well as a balanced assessment. And without system-wide agreement and understanding of what rigor and student engagement really looks like at the classroom level, we're not likely to see widespread or systematic improvement. So when you think about medical rounds, that's where instructional rounds come from. So thinking about the medical model, you see groups of doctors, sometimes residents and med students, walking from room to room, patient to patient, then stepping outside and doing some consulting about the patient's symptoms or what's the best course of treatment. So instructional rounds are very similar. Small groups, about 4 to 5 administrators, walk through a building, going into classrooms and gather information on current practices tied to a specific goal. So, for example, we began the year's instructional rounds looking at learning targets. And then our second course of rounds is looking at rigor. So outside of the classroom, the administrators kind of share what they saw, and then they document the evidence. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jackie to give you a little bit more detail specific to how we are implementing rounds here in the district. Right, just to advance this.
Perfect, thanks. Like Mary said, my name is Jackie DeCipio. I'm the principal at Bryan Middle School. Our student achievement objectives frame all the work that we do. As we began planning for our instructional rounds, we narrowed our focus to student engagement with a particular emphasis on learning targets, rigor, and engagement. As an EC12 group, we designed a data collection tool that would not include any teacher identifiers and included a continuum of indicators on learning targets. Now Linda's going to come.
Good evening. I'm Linda Fehrenbacher, principal at Sandburg. I do have a little prop to show you tonight, fitting in with learning targets. So our first rounds that we did, the 4 of us did, we looked at learning targets in buildings. And learning targets are, as you read it up there, they're intended learning based on the standards. Learning targets are kid-friendly language and are specific to the lesson for the day and directly connected to assessment. I personally am a big fan of Jan Chapuis and her work. In her book, 7 Strategies of Assessment for Learning, she described it this way. And it's very visual, and it's something that I think makes it more applicable and understandable. Let's pretend tonight this is a boulder. A standard is a boulder. Boulder size, it's a big topic, a year-long topic. It could be a year-long topic broken down into units of study. An example would be algebraic reasoning. That's an example of a standard. It's a math standard. Within the standard, you have units of study, and they're pebble-sized or rock-sized, and there are several units of study that can fit within a standard. You don't do the whole standard all at once. It's broken up into units of study. So a pebble or a rock is a unit of study, and the example might be using variables to solve linear equations. Within the unit of study is what Chapuis calls a grain size or a pebble size bit. It's a bit of learning that happens within a unit. And within a unit, there can be several targets, several bits of learning. And an example could be for this using variables to solve linear equations, I can solve for x. So I can solve for x fits into using variables to solve linear equation, which fits into algebraic reasoning. I hope that sort of kind of gives you a visual idea of how it works. I personally like visuals and use them at school. So that's really the way we look at targets, and we use targets so then we can assess them at the end of the lesson and get an idea if the kids learned it or not. And if not, then it should guide our instruction. It should guide instruction. So I'm going to turn it over to Erin now. You're welcome.
Thanks to Linda, I don't have rocks, but I'm going to give it my best shot. I'm Erin DeLuga, the principal at York High School, and I think a couple of the things that the instructional rounds has done is shed a lot of light and perspective on what we're doing from middle school through high school. And since we are a unit district, I think it's crucially important that we are analyzing what those best practices look like. So one of the things that it's done, and Linda was talking about learning targets, is give us that common language to build off of, rigor, relevance, learning targets, and have some common expectations attached to what that might look like in the classroom, no matter the grade level. It also deepens our understanding of best instructional practice, and I think where that hits home the most for me is that I think it's very easy to lose sight of what's going on in a classroom day to day when you're an administrator and you're not in it every day. And so us coming together and seeing these snapshots of what's going on across all of our buildings is extremely powerful, and it also gives us an idea of what we need to work with staff on for PD. It makes us visible, and there's a lot of power in visibility. I think when teachers give feedback often that they're not seeing administrators maybe in the hallways or in classrooms, to be able to do that and do it together a lot of teachers have commented in the middle schools from the 3 principals' perspective, and we're going to be at York on March 10th, and I'd imagine that they'll feel the same way. And it gives us that unified team perspective of us working together towards a common goal. And earlier I just said that we're going to be able to work on PD needs for our staffs based on what we're seeing, and that's not negative at all. It's a positive, saying if a teacher is struggling to create a meaningful learning target that they're going to carry on throughout a lesson and revisit at the end of a lesson, how can we help? How can we be people that are setting up those experiences for teachers to help them improve, or even to strengthen something that they feel they need strengthening on? And then, of course, it enhances collaboration across grade levels, amongst leaders in a building, and I think personally it establishes a lot of credibility for teachers to see us getting in there and living the day-to-day with them. And now I'm turning it over to Gina.
I, too, do not have a rock. So I am Gina Pogue-Reeder, the principal at Churchville Middle School, and we were Churchville was the first host for our instructional round, so we went back in September. So once we received the data, I first met with our school leadership team, and we reviewed it as a smaller group. And it was very exciting because we had been working on learning targets for quite a while, so it gave us an opportunity to celebrate the data that we had and really hone in on some bright spots. It also identified several areas for growth that we hadn't actually thought of until we were looking at them as a group. An example of that was that one of the questions after is a learning target visible, one of the follow-up questions was the learning target focused on student learning or student doing? And we were able to see that a lot of our learning targets, because of how we have introduced them, were set up as more of a doing, because the learning target may lead off students will be able to, or I can, and it ends up being more of a production versus if we even just change one word, I will be able to learn. It changes your mindset. It changes the shift. So that was an exciting thing, that was an easy shift that we could make once we started seeing that in the classrooms. And that was on us, and an easy PD opportunity for the future. And then we were able to share it with the whole staff. And again, it was cause for celebration and focusing on next steps. So as Erin alluded to, they were very excited to see the 4 of us together moving around, and we often heard, when are you coming back? I want to show more. And why didn't you stay longer? We wanted to show more. So that was very nice to see, and we're excited to go on to York.
So these are great opportunities, and you hear from our leaders how powerful it can be, but how does it really improve instruction, which is ultimately the bottom line for us? So through not only our individual schools collecting data on what they see during their rounds, we also compile that district-wide. So it's been very enlightening to determine where are areas that we can shore up our professional learning to better support our teachers. It has made a great difference in helping our leaders become more similar in their expectations of quality instruction. And that's a great thing, because the experience a child gets at Jackson should be similar to the experience a child gets at Hawthorne, the same among our 3 middle schools. So it definitely has helped in that area. And it brings coherence to our system as a whole as we start to build that shared understanding. Again, learning targets and quality learning targets, or the definition of rigor, it should be the same at elementary as it is at York. So we're finding that that has helped as well. And it's moving our system as a whole toward attaining our student achievement objectives, particularly in the area of student engagement. Questions?
I would expect teachers to be a little wary of 4 administrators showing up in the back of their classroom, but it sounds like that's not the case at all. Can you tell me a little bit more about?
Sure, I think that is a very accurate description. There were some people who were very tenuous, particularly when they couldn't visualize how that data would be reported out. But once the administrators gave us their ideas on what they wanted collected, the Department of Learning and Teaching created the tool that all administrators use, where no room numbers, no teacher names, nothing's identifiable. And so once teachers have had the opportunity to see that data, and we try and be very transparent with it, that helps take the nerves down a little bit. But it definitely does take some getting used to, and a trust and accepting that the data really is to be used for helping our leaders better understand what some of these concepts of rigor and engagement look like, and then how we can use that to better support our teachers.
Do teachers self-select to have you in their classroom?
No,
or?
we go in every room.
Okay, thank you.
Can you describe what data you're gathering, or give me an example of how that
So
works?
with learning targets, there was sort of a continuum of implementation. So the lowest level of implementation would be learning target is posted in the classroom. And so it was simply a yes or a no. The next level was learning target is visible. So sometimes a teacher may have so much going on that the learning target's posted, but not really where kids can reference it. Then is it written in kid-friendly language? So for learning targets, a lot of it was yes or no. Once you got to the middle where the learning target was presented at the beginning of the lesson, well, you have to interpret that data with caution, because depending on when the administrators walk into the room, it might be the middle or the end of a lesson. So it's not a negative that you didn't see it at the beginning, it just meant you didn't observe that because you weren't in the room at that part of the lesson. The same about referencing the learning target at the end of the lesson. That's a yes or a no. But again, if you walk in at the beginning, you're not staying for the entire class period. So it may be referenced. So some of those you have to interpret with caution. But again, as you're going throughout the whole building, you do get a sense of at what level implementation teachers are at.
Okay, so this is not student data.
No, it is not student data.
It's data that you're gathering as you're going through, given a form or something that you're...
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, it's a Google form, and then we're able to sort the information.
And just, I mean, to build on Jim's question, just how was that, I mean, how are the teachers, prepped for this, and how are they, I mean, how did this program get rolled out, and how are they brought into that?
It's a practice that we see all over the country. Dave began introducing it in the fall with an all-staff communication. Principals, we developed talking points for them to take back and share with their staff, and kind of gave them a time frame of when they would be coming through the school and doing the rounds.
So then they get feedback then afterwards?
Yes,
based
so
upon-
once the data's all done, principals get that to take back and share with their teachers.
Okay, positive and negative.
Yes, yes. And again, it's not teacher by teacher. You're looking at it from a
The building.
school-wide level.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I think that kind of leads to what I was going to refer to is, once again, it's about professional development. So it's utilized at the building levels or at the grade level. And so it's a team of the principal and the teaching staff, actually everyone at the building, looking at, what are we doing at this building? What are we doing at this grade level? What are we focused on professionally, a professional development standpoint? Yep.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Karen. So for example, if a school's data may show that a high percentage of teachers are posting learning targets, but there's a much lower percentage of learning targets written in kid-friendly language. Well, there's a great opportunity for them to say, okay, for us to move to the next level, we need to focus some professional development on writing learning targets that are in kid-friendly language. So that's how it can help inform professional development.
I'd like to add one thing to Chris's question too. Mary gave you an example of the learning targets form that they used, but the forms that we're using for the rigor and the student engagement walkthroughs are based on rubrics, and those rubrics are based on the rigor and relevance framework and come from the International Center on Leadership and Education, which you've heard us talk about at different presentations. So we're trying to provide some consistency into the language, and as we move through that, utilize resources that when Mary talked about developing a common language and a common understanding, and the rubrics that are developed, just like the Danielson rubric for teacher evaluation or whatever, there are objective criteria. You know, and I just, since she only gave the one learning example target, I thought I would just try to make the connection that the other work that we're doing is related to a lot of the things that you've been hearing over time in other presentations.
I was waiting, Margaret, I could tell.
Okay, and now I'm trying to put these two pieces together, because can you help, kind of just give some more information, help me put those two pieces together?
Yes, absolutely. So learning targets is very concrete. And so we felt that was the best place to start with instructional rounds to help lessen that anxiety of our teachers, because again, it is very objective and very much very straightforward. So that was our first round. Now as we've moved into, and our secondary team is finishing up their learning targets. Our elementary schools have moved into a second set of rounds looking at rigor. And as Dave said, we're using the rigor rubric that's related to the rigor and relevance framework. And so now they're taking learning targets are part of student engagement. Rigor is part of student engagement. So we're looking at those different components. So when we're looking at rigor, for example, one of the categories is looking at the type of discussion going on in the classroom. Is the discussion primarily teacher-driven? Are kids asking questions of each other? Are students being asked questions, but only one student replies? Or is everyone in the room required to be engaged and give a response? So it's looking at exemplars along that line. And that, again, is going to drive student professional learning for our teachers.
So are those the two tools, or will there continue to be another fold out, or?
This is something we'll continue because it's been such great professional learning for our leaders, and it has driven professional learning at the buildings. As we bring on 3 new principals next year, it will be a great opportunity to help bring alignment to our system much more quickly with 3 new people who are brand new to our system. So yes, we see it progressing to looking at student engagement as a whole. And there will be, again, a rubric that we'll use.
And Margaret, when this first started, I was developing some of this myself before Mary got here. So what I basically said is that the 2 things that I wanted to see was I wanted the middle school and the high school principal working together, because I felt that was something that was important for us. And I wanted the 3 focus areas to be learning targets, rigor, and student engagement, because that was directly related to our student achievement objectives. But then I asked them to kind of figure out how they want to implement this and how they want to do this. So they had kind of a draft, but I let them kind of determine. And since this is the first year we're doing it, it's a learning experience for us too. So as we move through this, we'll continue to do this, but our focus areas might be a little bit different. The way we manage the process might be a little bit different.
Right. For example, I'd like to see as we move along, maybe our feeder patterns work in a team. So schools, elementary schools that feed into Bryan would work with the Bryan principal and those principals, because again, you're looking at different levels of the system. Something else Dave said triggered a thought, and now I've lost it. But anyway, looking at how we regroup, I know what I was going to say. One of the things that's been interesting for me to look at is the number of classrooms that get visited. So particularly for our elementary schools, as they went through their first set of rounds, and they had blocked off a chunk of time, we would see that some buildings made it to very few rooms. And so when we asked them about that, they said, oh yeah, we would stand in the hall and we would really be debating about what we saw and where did it fall on the continuum. And that's the power for our Learning for Leaders, is it's really helping them clarify what best practice looks like in instruction.
One last piece I guess I'm thinking about as I listen to you, Mary. So it is the principals that are going, around to the classrooms, but it's also as they then talk to their building staff, it's all a collaborative effort.
Yes.
Okay. So once again, it's really important to have the clear communication up front of what we're doing, why we're doing it, that it's really about professional development
Yes.
and developing the system approach. And then continuously reiterating that so that, as I was at the last DLT meeting, it was really good to hear from our teaching staff about what their perspective is.
Right.
Yes, of course, the human element is something new, I'm apprehensive, what is it really going to be? But it was really nice to hear, the teacher seeing the benefit. And even one of our teachers said that's what her master's degree specialty was,
Right.
is doing these instructional rounds. So it's really good to hear, not just from your perspective, but also from the teachers.
Yeah, and I think the critical piece of that is being very transparent with the data and making sure that it gets back to the teachers so they can see and trust that it was collected without names, collected without any identifiers, and then looking at it and together making decisions about how to grow as a staff.
Leslie, I want to say thank you very much. This has been very insightful for me to help me better understand what the instructional rounds are or what they are not. And I think I heard that the data had been collected and rolled out at Churchville.
Yes.
Are there other?
Yes.
Has it been rolled out anyplace else yet, or is it?
All the elementary schools.
Okay.
And then, did you, Jackie and Linda, did you just get your data back? Yeah, so then they'll be sharing it at their next school leadership team meeting.
Okay. Well, again, this is very helpful to better
Good.
understand it. Can I just ask that maybe we do a continual, I don't know what the right time frame is,
Sure.
but a continual update just to talk about, as new things come up or as new areas are built in, can we just get additional feedback on how the
Absolutely.
process? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Learning and Teaching Committee report. Do you want to kick it off, Jim?
So Learning and Teaching Committee met on January 30th. And Mary and Dave Beatty, along with Kathy Kostick and Charles Sprandell, talked first about Eureka Math, gave us a little preview of instructional rounds, and then talked about standards-based reporting. So let me turn it over to the experts here and turn it over to Mary.
Thank you, Jim. I'm not going to say too much about Eureka Math because they're going to be up on the docket next and give you a great explanation of where we are with Eureka Math. But at the committee, it was an update on how the early adoption is going, as well as helping the members of the committee understand the shifts in the way we teach and students learn mathematics. So I think we all found it very informative. Some of us were more stuck than others on the sample problems that Dave gave, but I do believe I exhibited persistence and was able to model that while I stuck with it trying to find my solution. We did do a very similar presentation on instructional rounds, so it was nice to get some feedback from the members of the committee that were there so that we could address those during our presentation tonight. And then we introduced the committee to standards-based reporting and grading. That is something that we are going to be piloting at 2 of our elementary schools next year, and then begin to roll that out. So it was, again, really nice to give them a preview, gather their questions, because I presented today and will again tomorrow at the 2 pilot schools with their PTAs. So that was what our meeting was comprised of, and our next meeting will be on March 9th.
Can I ask you to give a little bit about the standards-based
Sure.
reporting? I know that if I recall correctly, or if I'm drawing the right connection, that there's standard-based grading or reporting at the high school not many years ago, maybe, I'm going to throw out a number, 5 years ago. Is that the same thing, or is this something different? I'm trying.
Before Mary answers, she certainly can, give you some ideas about what we're talking about here, but I just want to make sure that you know that we plan to give a full report on this at the March board meeting. So, I mean, certainly a brief introduction is great, but you're going to get a lot more on this, so.
So in essence, standards-based reporting and grading is looking at report cards that are based on the Illinois Learning Standards. And as we have written and adopted our new ELA curriculum and shortly our math curriculum, both of those are fully aligned to the standards. So it's a much more appropriate way to report students' progress. And standards-based reporting really shifts the focus from the letter grade to student learning, because it breaks each content area down into the standards that are being taught and where the student falls on the continuum of learning. I will say at the secondary level, 6 through 12, typically you use a hybrid model. So you have standards that you are reporting on, but then there's also a letter grade for the subject attached, because certainly we know that our kids need a GPA as they're making their college application, so it doesn't take that away from them. So it's actually far more informative, because rather than just a letter grade, that doesn't really tell you. If my child gets a C in math, it doesn't really tell me which specific areas they really need some more support in. So standards-based allows you to have that level of detail. And then, as Dr. Moyer said, we'll have a full introduction to it at our March board meeting.
Math pilot. Dave?
Yeah, I brought the rocks back. I saw her using the rocks. I'm like, this makes a lot of sense, and I need a visual aid too, so we're gonna use those. So I do want to introduce. I brought some of our Eureka early adopters here. So and actually, I was gonna have 6, as you can see. Use your math skills if we don't have 6. But we do have 4. 2 had sort of emergencies with children going on, so they're not here tonight. We've got Valerie Baxter, who teaches 2nd grade at Field. We've got Erin Waddell, who teaches 5th grade at Lincoln. We've got Sandy Laskowitz. Liskevich. I usually call her Sandy Laz.
Everyone does.
Everyone does, yeah. She teaches 5th grade at Jackson. And then Heather Bowler, who teaches 7th grade at Bryan. Okay, so we've got some of our Eureka Math experts here with us. You've heard from me a few times on Eureka Math, so I'm going to try to keep the sort of overview part brief and try to let the teachers who are here with us tell their stories with students and spend most of the time doing that. But in particular, we want to talk about why are we changing? Why do we want to change resources? We've been using everyday math for 20 years. maybe that's a point in and of itself. But I want to also point out that what our students need to know and be able to do with mathematics in their lives has dramatically changed in the last 20 years. I think we can all agree. Employers, entrepreneurs, employees just need different kinds of math skills now than they did in the past. And specifically, we're thinking around problem solving and explaining your thinking. We also know that all students, the research is pretty clear, that all students can achieve at the highest levels of math, and we want resources that support that. And then the new resources are also better aligned with Illinois' math standards, which are the same or very similar to the Common Core. I also want to point out we've got 2 overarching math goals. These goals are district-wide K-12. These are the big boulders, right, our boulders. These are our big boulders we're trying to get all students to, specifically thinking about problem solving. How are they solving these never-before-seen messy problems? How are they persevering in this problem-solving process? And then how are they constructing viable arguments with mathematics and statistics and breaking those arguments down that others are making? These are incredibly important, big boulder ideas that we have to do a lot of these little parts to get back to this big boulder, right? And so all the things that happen in the different grade levels, so we can think about the little smaller stones, those are coming together into these 2 big boulders that we're thinking about for our overarching goals. We've talked about this before, but specifically about Eureka Math. It's very widely used. It's very well respected. It gets lots of good reviews from third parties in terms of its alignment to Common Core and its support for teachers. We had groups of teachers from grades K through 8 looking at lots of different resources. They chose Eureka Math over a variety of others. And there's also a ton of support out there that's grown up around Eureka Math because it is, to a degree, open source. So other teachers, other districts can actually produce their own content and sort of throw it into the Eureka Math pool. So you can go on to YouTube and you can watch teachers teaching just about any lesson from Eureka Math. So if you're a parent at home and you know your kids just did or is in the middle of module 4, you can actually go online and figure out, like, watch a teacher or put your kid in front of the computer and have them watch another teacher teaching a similar lesson, and you know that it's aligned with what's going on in our classrooms. So there's just a lot of support going on with Eureka Math that we want to take advantage of. In math class, in particular in K-5, we're going to see a very specific set of things going on in a lesson. Specifically, we're going to see fluency practice, which is getting at number sense. Application problems, which is where the problem-solving process is taking place. We're also doing conceptual development in every single lesson where we're learning new things. We want to make sure we're reflecting on all that new learning, so that's taking place in that lesson structure. And then we also have exit tickets built in so that we can see formatively where students are each and every day relative to the learning targets of that day. So our tiny little pebbles here. Okay, we got exit tickets to help us measure those. But I do want to point out also, when we get back to this idea of problem solving, we've got, in math sometimes we have lots of these tiny little pebbles. Where every day we're learning this little new thing. We've got this new procedure, this new operation, this new way to look at this kind of equation. Sometimes these little pebbles never actually make it into the larger pieces, and those larger pieces never actually make it back into the boulder. The problem-solving process is, you can think about it, it's like the glue that takes the little pieces and forces kids to create the larger chunks, forces them to connect the little pieces together by applying those concepts into, like, bigger picture problems. Okay, where they're not just using today's lesson to solve a problem, they actually have to think back to what they learned last year or what they learned in the previous part of this year to solve that problem. And that's sort of like the glue that's taking all these little pieces and putting them together. So we want to make sure that problem solving is a big part of what we're doing. So I just wanted to show some examples. We're not going to go through this. I'm not going to make anyone do any math today like we did at the committee meeting. But I want to point out the visual nature of the math that we're going to be that we're having students do, and the modeling that we're asking them to do, and how that connects every grade level together. So this is an example of first grade, and we're looking at these number models where we've got numbers broken down into smaller numbers. This is a concept that's incredibly important, and it is dramatically different than memorizing facts. Memorizing facts only gets you about this far. It makes you into a calculator. What we want kids to be able to do is break numbers down. They need to know that 6 is made up of multiple different kinds of numbers, and they can break them down in different ways, and that's powerful later on in math. And so we want them to be doing that early on so that they can use those skills later on, not just memorizing the 4 + 2 is 6 with the flashcards. An example from 5th grade, we're looking at a tape model. This in particular one we actually did at the committee meeting, or it was one of the ones that was an option. And in this particular example, we're actually looking at fractions and using fractions and sort of going backwards with fractions. And this is something that's very easy to do with pictures, but if you don't have the picture, if you don't have a way to model it, this actually is a pretty difficult problem. A lot of people can't do this problem if you just give them the words. But what we do is we teach kids visual models to use to break the problems down and to think about them differently. And so this would be an example of that tape model. More tape models in this particular 6th grade example. We're looking at tape models only now. We're looking at them with variables and with equations, which is probably something maybe most of us never did with equations, is actually look at them visually. But this is the kind of thinking we want kids to be able to do because it's flexible. They can use this in later math. If they understand how these things are broken apart and put back together, they can then use that to solve more complicated problems and more novel problems. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our teacher voices so they can tell us what's happening in classrooms. So we'll start with Heather because she's here first. So would you come on up, Heather?
I sat next to you. I'm Heather Velour. I teach math at Bryan Middle School, 7th grade. I'm also the math department chair at Bryan. I probably have a different experience than the other teachers that are up here, mainly because I teach middle school and also because I did not start the year with the pilot. That has been a little bit challenging. We kind of jumped into Module 3. When my coworker Kirsten Scalatine and I were deciding which module, we wanted something that we weren't happy with how we used to teach it. We knew that for next year, students were going to be using it, so we wanted to kind of get used to the feel and try out Eureka. So it has been a different experience. There's been some things that we've learned along the way, like we should have started with something else, sorry, I'm a little nervous. We should have started with Module 2 probably instead of jumping right into Module 3. So obviously like a little learning curve there. But overall, our students are persevering more than I've ever seen them persevere before in the math class. The problems that they've been seeing are much more challenging than we've ever expected from our students in 7th grade. They are distributing fractions and combining like terms, and just recently we're solving equations involving like vertical angles and adjacent angles and angles on a line, and knowing that angles are supplementary and having to solve equations with that. And it's definitely been a lot more challenging, and our students have been definitely persevering. They work so hard every single day to figure it out, and they definitely keep working until they figure it out. So it's definitely been challenging, but it's exciting to see what they are capable of with the new curriculum.
Sandy?
I was hoping I'd have the 3-minute timer up there because I can keep on talking about math. It's going really great this year. I have so many success stories. But something that just happened today was I'm having a continuing argument with one of my students who says he doesn't have to show his work and he doesn't have to draw any pictures because he could do it all in his head. And as I was pointing out on his exit ticket, that even though you did it in your head, you have 2 wrong answers. And one of the lowest achieving math students from 4th grade was sitting at the table with us. And she said, why won't you just draw the picture? Because now you could really understand it. And so she proceeded to show him
what she did, a person who had low confidence in math, who didn't really think she could do math very well, was showing a kid who is a high achieving math student on maps and other measures, but in class is not doing very well because he is overconfident in what his brain can do, and he will not put stuff down on paper. So I found that to be really telling as far as how things are going in 5th grade, because the kids who didn't feel like they had math ability now feel like they have math ability. They don't roll their eyes and say, oh no, not word problems, I can't do these. Instead, they feel like they can do everything. Now, that doesn't mean that they all can or that they're always successful, but in general, they feel like they have some tools to tackle the problems with. So for that reason alone, I think this program is really great. I think it really challenges them. I don't have parents calling and emailing and saying they're super frustrated because there's a lot of resources available for them. We take it slow. And the continuous assessment by using the exit tickets it's exactly what it's supposed to be. It's formative. If the kids don't get it, you pull them in a group and you work on it until they do, and the other kids can move ahead. I think it's a perfect fit, especially for 5th grade. I love it. I can't say enough about it. I think my 3 minutes are up. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Erin. I teach 5th grade at Lincoln. I had a similar situation today, actually, where a student didn't want to draw the pictures and ended up getting an exit ticket wrong. So when we first started looking at this curriculum, I was a little apprehensive about all the pictures, but and then also with other curriculums that we were starting this year, and I can't say how happy I am that I did do this pilot for Eureka Math. I've never had a class that can explain what they're doing and why they're doing problems better than this class. And they just have so much confidence in the math that they're doing. And they truly understand the concepts, and it's amazing. And I have a class of such a wide range of learners, and it truly is a great fit for every single one of them. So I know that teachers in the district are all teaching this in different ways, and some of them are doing kind of whole group lesson by lesson. I've chosen to kind of play with that a little bit, and I'm doing more of a workshop model sort of teaching, where students are setting goals for themselves and kind of working at their own pace. And it's a great way for them to take ownership of their learning. And they're kind of where one student may be on lesson 5, another one may be on lesson 21 and of the same module. And because of how Eureka sets it up, we kind of do an application problem at the beginning of the lesson all together. And then based on where they are for that day, they kind of work where they need to. And I am able to check in with almost every student every single day. So it's very, very busy, but it's wonderful for them, and it's very individualized for them. But overall, no matter how you do this and no matter how you use the resources that we're given, it's phenomenal. So, and everyone who I've talked to who has done it has just seen great results. So kids are just achieving phenomenal things. So it's great. Thank you.
So like Sandy, I wish there was a timer because I could talk on and on about this to the point where when I say, okay, it's time for math, I can see out of my periphery kids going, yes, it's math time, awesome. And also yesterday during our TDPE, which is our recess, I ended up lapping the playground with a student as I was teaching him how to cube numbers because he's so into math right now, and Grandpa had taught him how to square. So I'm like, all right, let's one up that and teach him how to cube numbers. But for second graders, and I'm somebody who's been in the district for a long time, so I've always taught everyday math. But switching to Eureka has been transformational for me but also for the students. They're mathematicians. They're not just learning math. They're mathematicians. They feel it. Those students that I know would have struggled with everyday math, they see themselves as mathematicians, and they are being very successful. We spend a lot of time in second grade on number sense, which is that ability to manipulate and understand what numbers are. We jump right into the application problems that Dave talked about. And in everyday math, we would do, okay, here's a unit on addition story problems. Here's a unit on subtraction story problems. So students just went, oh yeah, we're doing addition right now because that's what we did yesterday and that's what we'll do tomorrow. So I just need to take those two numbers and add. Those problems are mixed up now. So students actually have to comprehend what they're reading and figure out, okay, do I add, subtract? And then we talk about the problems. How did you solve the problem? How did you solve the problem? And the students share those ways. We just finished up our unit on addition and subtraction of multi-digit addition and subtraction numbers. We learn more hands-on ways of how to solve that so that students understand why we're borrowing, why we're regrouping. They know why to do that and how to do that and why they're doing it. And I've had fewer students struggle, particularly with the borrowing part. Why do I borrow? When do I borrow of subtraction? I only really have one or two who still consistently are struggling with it, but everybody else got it. And I would say it usually takes 3 to 4 weeks of going over that in the past. But I asked my students, I said, so I have to go to the board meeting and I need to talk about Eureka Math. What should I tell them? So just a few snippets. A couple of them said, I like how there are many ways to solve the problems. It's more challenging and funner than last year. They're second graders. We do funner. I think they take a longer time to explain it, so you have more experience with it. That's an 8-year-old. You figured it out, kiddo. We learned a lot of new ways to solve math problems. What I like about Eureka Math is that all the new ways to learn math. I also like it because I'm starting to get better at this. I like the sprints because it's challenging to answer all those questions in 1 minute. And I think Eureka is outstanding because you get to learn different ways to solve math, and you get to use a place value chart and solve the vertical way, which is the standard way that we all grew up solving. Yes, that the parents all know, yes. So, my students are enjoying being mathematicians in our class.
Thanks, Valerie. You guys might have to answer questions too.
I have a couple of questions for whoever wants to jump in on this. Do you feel like, compared to everyday math, in the course of the year, you're teaching more math, less math, or is that just a question that, because they're so different, can't be answered?
I think it's deeper math. No, that's okay. I think it's deeper. I think we're focusing on one topic for longer, and we're able to go deeper with it. So for my second graders, we never usually got to 3-digit addition and subtraction. We've been able to get to that because they've had the building blocks from the single digit addition and subtraction to the double digit to the triple digit. And they're now into that and able to handle it really well. So I think it just goes deeper rather than skimming over a lot of topics.
Yeah.
Now, when that kid gets to the following grade level, is there incorporated within Eureka Math a way to reinforce that? Because time has passed, and unless you keep reinforcing it, they don't have it for the rest of their lives.
I would hope so, but I don't see third grade.
So,
and I'm doing the second grade stuff.
I'll say that, speaking to the point of deeper, what we're doing is we're taking those smaller pieces and we're cementing them together into the larger chunks that are actually easier to remember because the kids gets a better sense of the larger topic and not just all the little tiny pieces that are disconnected. So the next year when they have to recall addition and subtraction, they're recalling this giant chunk that's all connected, and they can remember the little pieces because it was all put together in the classroom at the same time. Like you were talking about, we're doing these problems, or they have to be choosing what they're doing and why and defending that reasoning. And as a result, the next year, we don't have to spend a lot of time going back over the little pieces. We can just recall the big chunks, and it makes more sense. And so we can, I think what's going to happen is we're going to be able to go farther over time as we adopt this over the period of a few years. And we're going to see students actually going deeper and farther across multiple grade levels.
I also wanted to say that in the past, when we were preparing for a module test or a unit test, we would do review and we would send home study guides, and parents would require study guides. And we don't do that anymore because we're assessing along the way and we know who gets it. And if they don't get it, we make sure they do. So we're pulling it. I don't really see that there's going to be that kind of forgetting over the summer kind of thing, because if they really have it and they can apply it, I think they just have it. This is a totally different ball game. It really is. We'll see what happens. I hope it's true, but I'm not seeing that we need to do any test preparation. They're ready.
And you feel that applies to everybody?
It does.
So
I know we talked about how a lot of it has to do with problem solving in all grade levels. And a lot of the problems are, or all of them, are multi-step problems. So you may have a problem with fractions that has 2, maybe 3 or 4 steps in one problem. And it may not only cover fractions, but it may cover place value and then also measurement within the same problem. And kids have to, it's very, very complex. So they have to use all of those strategies within just that one problem in order to make sure that they answer all of the different pieces. So it's very strategic. It's very, they really have to be concrete with their learning in order to, and their knowledge in order to be successful with it. So they can't just do a study guide, study the skill, do the test, forget it. It's just they have to truly understand what they're doing and be able to explain it as well. So.
Here's question number 2. Erin, stay right there, because this you inspired this question. So
Okay.
you've got 2 kids. One kid has done all 21 modules in the lesson.
Okay.
Question 1A, what do you do with that kid when there's still time in the lesson and they're done and they totally get it? Question 2B is the kid that is on lesson 5 or on module 5 out of that lesson, and they just run out of time before you need to move on. What do you do with that kid?
So the student who has finished, there's always extra enrichment activities, or in my model that I'm doing, they check in with me to make sure that they've finished the exit slip and they are good to go for the next lesson. So they check in with me, I go over it. If there's something wrong, we go over it together, I have them fix it, they come back, and then they can move on to the next lesson. So I have some computer programs, we have some workbook stuff that they can do. I also have some enrichment activities. We have some online programs that we have that have problem-solving activities. We have some tangible activities that they can do to move on, and then and then the student who did you say did not get through it?
They're on module 5, and there's 21 modules within the lesson, and they just, there's just not enough time before you need to move on, and they're not going to get through all 21.
Before the next day?
Or whatever.
Lesson 5?
Yeah, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, however it's broken up, if
So
that's
we
the
would
end of
look
the
at
week or.
So we would look at where they are in that lesson, what skill, how well they're doing with that skill for that or that target, and then decide what they would want to do or need to do for that night for homework, or what I could do to help them that day for the rest of the time, and then we would go from there. It's kind of assessing, how I'm doing it is assessing students where they are in that lesson for that day. It's a very day-by-day process for me. And like I said, it's a very busy way to do it for me, but it's working really well. And I've had to tweak it a lot throughout the year, but it's very individualized, which is best practice for my classroom with many, many needs. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And by the way, this was a great presentation. I really
thank
appreciate
you.
all of your time and the effort you put into preparing for it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
And just to speak to that same point, I think the old way is, well, we went through lesson 2. If you didn't get it, you didn't get it. We're moving on because the class has got to move on, right? And what Aaron's talking about is, no, actually, we're going to make sure you understand lesson 2 before we move on to lesson 3 with you. And I can have the other kids in the class moving forward before you do. And that's actually okay. You're going to work at your pace. And maybe we can speed you up over time. Maybe that's possible. But we're not going to allow you to not learn the curriculum because you can't keep up with the average kid in the class. So I think that's another important piece that you're using is like you're ensuring that every kid is going to learn the material. The time is the variable. Learning is not the variable.
But still make sure that others can go faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love math, and I love that everyone is beginning to love it, which is wonderful, because I agree. I think everybody can be a mathematician. So now, my question is, I'm trying to understand this because I'm still going from the traditional model where you have a book in 2nd grade, and then you have a different book in 3rd grade, and I'm trying to understand if we go on the same equation. Let's say student A gets through 21, I'm just making this up, 20 modules, okay, at the end of the year. And student B gets through 15 modules at the end of the year. When they go to that next year, how does that work?
Yeah. So I think that's something we're going to have to figure out over time as to like how we hand off information to the next grade level of where kids are and what their next steps are. I think that with the technological tools that we have available through Zern and through Khan Academy and through some other sources, there are ways for us to track student learning sort of in aggregate over the course of their whole career in our district. And so a teacher, say a 5th grade teacher, could actually look at that information and go, okay, I know that this kid has cemented in these concepts, and here are areas that they struggle. And then they could also look at the 5th grade curriculum and go, okay, in this module, the kid really needs to know A, B, and C, and I can see that they got B and C, but A is kind of missing. So they can provide support for that student around whatever concept A is to make sure they're prepared for Module 1. Because of the way math is structured, some things depend on other things, but it's not like everything depends on everything that happens before. So there are ways I think that we can track and hand off information more strategically that we're not currently doing at that level. I think though we are right now, we do hand off information about individual kids from grade level to grade level, but I really see this as an opportunity for us to start looking at it in aggregate and really tracking what students are doing over time and making sure they get what they need. Because I also believe that with this idea that all kids can learn math at the highest levels, I honestly believe that it's experiences that we give kids that determine whether or not they learn the math or not something innately wrong with the child. And so if we notice that a student is really struggling in math, then it's a flag for us to go, okay, what do we need to do differently with this child that's not happening right now because they're not growing like they really should. And so that's something that I think we can start to tackle more with the way that like Aaron is doing this, is using the materials, that we can start doing that more.
One thing I'd like to add to that too, Margaret, is that Mary's going to be sitting down with the elementary principals, and through the middle school task force, we're doing this, and in the high school in different ways. But as we look at schedules, we're all trying to do interventions, but we're trying to be more, we're committed to being more systematic about it and have that built into the schedules and ensure that we know where a student's specific individual problem is in a given unit or a given concept, so that they're not just tracked into you're in a lower level math and you're never going to learn math and you're never going to get out of it, but that we catch them in real time so that theoretically, as we figure out how to do this right, there should be very few kids who get to the end of the year that haven't mastered what they're supposed to know at the end of the year.
And thank you for that. And I guess I was thinking, I mean, I love the idea that this can be individualized. And I was just wondering how that information would track from year to year. And I know all this is still being developed. One other quick question. I'm just wondering if you could provide any additional detail on the adoption rollout.
Do you mean like the actual materials themselves, or professional learning, or?
So next year, are all
Sure.
of the schools going to be on it? And
Yes. So next year, all of our K-5 schools, all of our elementary schools, all of our K-5 teachers will be provided the Eureka materials. And that's the plan. If Eureka is adopted, we'll be provided the Eureka materials, both the student workbooks materials and also all the assessment materials. So that includes exit tickets, the fluency exercises, and the assessments. And the assessments we've actually looked at and created pre-assessments. So now we have, for each module, we have summative and sort of summative assessments for the end, and we have pre-assessments for the beginning, so we can start to look at student growth as they enter a module and leave a module. Those things will all be provided for teachers next year. We will be doing professional learning for K-5 starting on March 3rd at the Institute Day. And we will continue that professional learning over the course of the spring and the summer and into the fall. And actually, I would say we're going to continue professional learning opportunities for teachers all the way through next year and probably throughout future years as well. But we want to deliver that in such a way that's convenient for teachers, that gives them options for what they can do, how they can get the professional learning, and it's not all, this one particular way, that one particular way. But we want to make sure everyone feels confident and ready to use the materials to the fullest that they can walking into it, knowing that the first time you do a module, even if you've tried to study it for a long period of time, you've looked at them as a curriculum development team member and really tore them apart, you're still going through them with kids. It's a totally different experience. So we're also utilizing the coaches next year to make sure we've got that on-the-job support for our teachers who need it, which is going to be most of them, I think, just because it's tough to get started. And we've also got, I think, about a third of our K-5 teachers are actually part of the adoption. So we'll have a giant resource in each school of folks who have already gone through this. And so like Erin can work with the rest of her team isn't using it this year, so she'll be able to work with the rest of your team. Sandy's team is all using it, but they'll be able to work with some of the other teams in the building who aren't. So that way we've got people right down the hall in every single building that can help provide that support. One of the reasons why we wanted to do this adoption in the way that we did.
is there a plan for middle school?
Yeah, so it would be similar. We're not going to be doing professional learning on March 3rd for middle school, but I do anticipate that we do professional learning this year and into the summer and next year for middle school teachers. The Eureka materials, the current plan is to use them in our core middle school classes, which are the grade level courses, so 6th grade Math 1, 7th grade Math 2, and 8th grade pre-algebra. We haven't made decisions on the accelerated pathway or whether or not we're changing those materials. I think we're pretty safe to say that the REACH pathway is not changing this year. We've purchased materials for multiple years for that pathway, and so we're not considering that, and the teachers are very happy with those materials. Heather can speak to that also. She teaches REACH Math in 7th grade. And so the Carnegie materials we currently have in 6th and 7th grade for REACH, and then we also use the same book that the high school uses for their advanced geometry classes for our geometry class in the middle school. So I don't anticipate us changing those materials. Our middle school teachers that looked at Eureka and Carnegie were actually very torn between those two. They look very similar. They were like, we're not sure which ones we want to use. We ended up going with what the elementary school was using because they were so close, and we decided it would make sense to make it consistent all the way through 8th grade. But I think that the Carnegie materials are also excellent. They do a lot of the same things that Eureka is doing. So I don't anticipate us really changing that anytime in the near future. But yeah, for middle school, we want to do the same thing. So all the core classes will have Eureka next year.
I think you hit it, based on this conversation, all of my pieces, but just wanted to clarify. So early adopters, it's more than these 4 teachers. This is just a sample set. So we've got teachers at the levels, various levels, at various schools, or all the schools that are part of this pilot, that were part of the decision process about what do we need to do? Do we stick with everyday math? Do we go to Eureka? Do we do Carnegie? Do we do whatever? Not only that, but what do we do pre-K all the way through high school?
Right.
Okay. So that leads it to the second piece. I think you addressed it, but in case there's more to add, the question was, this is K through 8,
Yep.
Eureka Math. And then the linkage to high school.
Yeah, so I've been working with Sue Brown, and she and I have been leading the high school team. So we have a team working on algebra, a team working on geometry, a team working on algebra 2, and a team working on college algebra, which is the core sequence of courses that students who leave the middle school with 8th grade pre-algebra, then would go to 9th grade algebra AB, geometry, and so on. And so we've been working on that pathway of courses. Currently, we're working on assessments and targets for those courses. We're looking at resources to support those targets. We've looked at Eureka. We're not as impressed with Eureka's offerings in the high school. And so we're looking at other options in addition to Eureka, but I would say we're not as excited. Let's just say we're not as excited about what Eureka looks like at the high school level.
Still focusing on algebra and geometry in the
Yes,
transition to
that's
make
right.
sure that all the kids are prepared there.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
and actually Sue's been very diligent about looking at what the middle school, what changes are occurring in the middle school, how that's connecting up with what we're doing at the high school, and making sure that we're making those decisions very, with a lot of thought.
And then the last thing, I think, Dave, you hit it, which was what I was trying to get a sense of, is there are still specific grade level learning targets that the students need to master in each grade to move forward.
Yes.
And so the concept of your example, Aaron, of, one student might be in unit, I think you said 5 versus 21, that is just more complex on some of the learnings. Is that the difference?
So I
I'm a
think
little.
not everyone's going to be doing that. Right. Okay. So what Erin's doing, where she's really giving the opportunity for students to move at their own pace. Not everyone is currently doing that in the early adoption, and I wouldn't anticipate everyone doing that in the adoption next year. I think that's something we work towards over time. I think that is where we want to go, but we're going to take it one step at a time and make sure that we connect the dots, make sure that we're looking at what are the key pieces from each grade level, make sure we got all that articulated and we know for sure that that's happening. I think also it requires a great degree of skill to be able to do that kind of teaching, and in different kinds of skills. And so I think that that's something that we need to look at, and we need to honor that from our teaching staff and say, are there things that we need to help folks learn how to do better? And so we would I'm committed to doing that for sure with math.
Okay, but once again, there are certain targets that students need to learn each year in math, and that's what we're focused on. It's just a different way of doing it, not the circular everyday math,
That's right.
but really, the students mastering it.
That's
And I
right.
think as you talked, I think I understood now why your example, Sandy, and Aaron, I think you both talked about, where the student with their exit slips, it was the wrong answer, but you have no idea. There's like several different math skills that were required to work that problem, and you had no idea which one they didn't master. So that's the importance to communicate to the students. It's not that we're being mean or whatever. It is important for us to understand which of the skills that you mastered or didn't in order to where the answer was not correct, right? So that takes effort from your standpoint, but the complexity is really intriguing.
Right. I think another thing that it connected to that is what's important is that students are able to defend their thinking. It's not important that they get the right answer. That is we're too focused on the right answer too many times. In real life, there are very few right answers. It's really about, can you think through this thing? Can you defend it to other people? Can you convince other people that your thinking is the best thinking or is sound thinking about whatever it is that's going on here? And not so much about, I wrote down the right answer, why didn't you give me credit? There's the right answer, what's wrong with that? It's not about that. It's about, what's your defense of that answer? That's what I'm interested in.
All right, so I don't want to beat this to death, but I'm trying to simplify it a little bit. So your pebbles.
Yeah.
All right, those are modules?
These would be like lessons, I think.
So lessons are the smallest unit that you teach every day?
Yes.
And those would be part of a ROC, which is a module?
Correct. Like a unit. Yep.
Or a unit.
Mm-hmm.
So does every kid have to pass every pebble to get to the rock? I guess that's my question. Is what I hear here is that there may be 20 of these things. To pass the concept or to show proficiency in the concept, you may need to be able to do 10 of them. For those that are moving faster, there's 10 more that they can go into. But what you're trying to do in order to move to that next rock or whatever, that next piece, is you don't have to pass 21 of these things. You just have to get to 10 and move along. And some kids will do 10 and some kids will do 21. So it gives you the flexibility to meet the kids where they are as you move through. Is that unique to this Eureka Math? And is that some really big thing that is added vis-a-vis the way things used to be taught, where everybody kind of did a unit and then went to, it allows more flexible grouping and stuff
Well,
like
and
that.
before, everyone would do the whole page of everyday math that was assigned. Eureka has must-dos, should-dos, or can-dos, and should-dos. So as a teacher, I can look at this and say, okay, my student who's really achieving a lot, I would like you to do the whole problem set, which may be the 21 problems, which increase in difficulty as you go along, and you add a little bit more complexity to it. For some of my students who may be struggling a little bit more, I just want them to do the can-dos. So I want you to get those 5 problems down, and I want to see that you have that skill that we taught today solidified. So it could be that student who also takes a long time to solve a lot of problems. Maybe they're only doing those 4 or 5 problems, and some of the other kids are extending their learning by doing that. So the program does offer you that flexibility that and this has been a parent component
Sure.
of teaching them that you might have pages coming home that aren't complete, and that's okay. Don't get on your child because the whole page isn't complete. We did what we were supposed to do in our math lesson. I want to send it home as some samples for you so that you can see what we were doing in class, but don't force them to finish it because it's coming home. Some of it's coming home undone.
Right, so your kid has the foundation.
Right.
And that's
right.
all we're really focused on.
Yeah.
And if they want to jump forward, it's there. But otherwise, we can move to the next.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, and likewise, we can structure homework that way as well. So sometimes in my class, we'll box homework and say, okay, you're going to do A, B, and C, and you're going to skip D, E, F, and you're going to skip the next chunk. They kind of number them a little odd. But then you're going to do all the back. So we'll kind of, it's our version of even and odds when we were kids. Like, you do the evens, you do the odds. But we're making sure that they're getting those skills without overtaxing them and taking hours to do homework. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, exciting. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Get the little pebbles off of here.
Okay. There are 2 items on the superintendent's consent agenda. Would a board member like to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Yes, can we, actually, I'd like to remove both of them. Thank you.
Take each one separate.
Yes.
No. Okay, you want to make a motion for the first item?
Sure. Okay. I move that the Board of Education approve a 3-year contract with Alliant Misero Insurance from February 15th, 2017 through February 15th, 2020 at a cost of $68,160 annually with an option to renew at the same rate for 2 additional years.
Second? Okay, moved by Jim, second
Sure.
by Chris. Go ahead. Oh, did you want to discuss?
Yeah, if that was the one you wanted to. We had talked to Chris. Margaret and I had sat in on the insurance committee meeting, and we thought that it would be worthwhile to have Chris briefly talk about the process. There's a lot of thought and rigor that went into this, and I think the nice thing was is at the end of the presentations, I think that it was pretty clear who was the winner. So.
This process we felt like was important. The benefits is a big component of our budget. We frequently talk about the budget being 80% staffing and 65% of that is salaries and about 15% of that is benefits. And so the broker is a key component of it. To work aggressively and proactively on the district's behalf related to health insurance and life and dental and flexible spending accounts. We sent the RFP out. We received 6 proposals back. 3 of them met our criteria, and we interviewed those 3 companies. On the interview committee, we had Audrey Reed, our benefits coordinator. We had, from the custodian union, we had Thomas Weiss. From the PSRP support staff, we had Marcy Grachowski. With the teachers, we had Corrine Alfano, Carrie Emmerson, and Mark Bible. And then we had Margaret Harrell and Chris Bloom. So we had 9 members of the insurance on the interview committee. Each interview was 12 questions, 60 minutes. They all went the full length, and we kept them on task from going over. It was very thorough, and as Chris said, I felt like we reached, we were pretty much consensus that this Mesero was the best company. Renee Formel is the in the interview process. She is the key, the main. She answered all the questions, but she said she would be our point person. She had a team supporting her, but she would be the one, the go-to person for the district and for Audrey in benefits and leading up the insurance committee at all the meetings. They'll be involved in all the open enrollments and so forth. But that's pretty much it. I'll open it up if you have questions. But the interview committee did a great job, and we are very thankful for all of their participation. It was educational. Plus, we felt like, a very educational process, and also a good one in selecting a real good vendor that we look forward to working with.
I just have 2 questions. Do you recall what we were paying the old vendor?
$47,000 per year.
Okay. And Chris, you said that it was pretty obvious by the end of it who the clear winner was. Any particular reasons for that? Now, I did read the due diligence you did, and that seemed pretty clear that everybody who's the districts that are currently working with this person, think she does a great job. But any other reasons that you felt it was just a clear winner?
And I am going to answer your question, and I'll just go through one other additional piece of the interview process. There was a spreadsheet that everyone filled out individually. Okay, so everyone filled out this spreadsheet individually and kind of talked through for each of the 12 questions what the strengths were based off what they they discussed and what the weaknesses were. And that was going on during the process. At the end of the session, there was a brief recap. And that's where, you had all these people who had these individual responses all came up with the same answers about key pieces like the ability to provide the information on a as-needed basis, not waiting until 30, 60 days before the renewal to start trying to educate people on what's going on in the insurance business. So that was a very key piece that people were looking for that they hadn't had information or detail on before. So really continuous education, continuing bringing new options, continually bringing information on based off, like data specific, based off what you have. Here are some things that you might consider. So really having specific information that's based off what the utilization in our district has done. So that was one of the pieces that we heard over and over again that this Alliant would do. And again, a lot of it was based off the ability to provide, I mean, this benefits packages, it can be very technical. So really being able to break down the information into a layman's terms so people can understand what you're talking about. It can make educated decisions based off what you're talking about. And that was one of the things that this organization, and particularly the person, Renee, was very good at.
I'll just add, thanks to Chris, one, just for keeping us on time and running a tight ship. But we had a small shop of a handful of folks. We had a massive shop that showed us their team and brought like 7 people, and we weren't quite sure who you called depending on what you had. And then you had Mesra, which was not fit nicely in the middle, which had all the resources. The core resources beyond just a small shop, so wellness and things like that, but also the person that was going to be doing your business was sitting in front of you and you had one person to call. And so, I think that he gave us the 3 flavors, and I think that everybody felt that the middle flavor that had that combination of depth, but also the personal service won the day for us. So that's where it kind of fit.
I just had one question. I know the references highlighted different districts, but how about unit districts and our comparables? Meaning, is this company, work with them, know what it is? I mean, I know that's how we look at things as well.
Well, they work with Valley View School District, which is a unit district that includes Romeoville High School and Bolingbrook High School, but then all the middle schools and elementary schools that feed into it. Valley View has 2,000 employees, so they're much bigger than us. Huntley 158 is also a unit district with over 1,000 employees, but they are not currently working with the 7 districts that we compare with right now. We did interview. The other companies did work with some of our comparables, the other 2 that we interviewed, but we like this one the best.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes?
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes, it's 5 ayes, no nays, 2 absent. That motion passes. I need a motion to approve the display of Eureka math materials.
I was going to let Chris do this since I stole his, but I move that the Board of Education approve the public display of the proposed K through 8 math curriculum resources.
Second?
Moved by Jim, second by Margaret. Any further discussion? Yeah, right. Okay.
This can be a voice vote. It's because we split them
Oh,
up.
okay.
that we-
Right, we're just displaying. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that motion passes.
Okay, first of all, was at an event at the high school last night for Black History Month, and our keynote address was given by one Margaret Harrell, and she did a wonderful job. It was a very nice evening, so I wanted to acknowledge that. A couple other high school related items. I've heard a lot of positive feedback from a variety of different parents about the 8th grade parent night at the high school. And also we have our girls bowling team and one wrestler going to be headed to state soon. So the couple items there. Secondly, you heard Linda, she's the one who brought the rocks, if you remember. She referenced Jan Chapuis. If you recall, Jan Chapuis was in the district last year at one of our January Institute Day. So if you've heard that name before, she was part of some of our reports last year, and we did some study with our people on the book that Linda referenced. Another thing that I would just state also is that a parent at the superintendent coffee at Fisher yesterday, homework frequently comes up at those superintendent coffees, the subject of homework. And she expressed how much she loves the concept of exit tickets, because if her kid knows what he's supposed to know, then he doesn't have to do 20 problems of what I would call mindless homework for no apparent reason for half an hour or whatever, because he already knows what he's supposed to know. And likewise, if he doesn't know a specific concept, his homework is tailored toward what he needs to work on. So it was a positive comment from a parent related to the presentation tonight. So I thought I'd share that. Then I just wanted to report out, we attended the Winter LUDA Conference. Mary Baum, Aaron DeLuga, Jackie DeCipio, and I attended. And this was the first time LUDA is starting a strand for principals. Both LUDA and IASA are getting worried about people in the superintendent pipeline and are starting to try to get some principals involved in things that have typically been district level types of activities. They did have two strands, and there was one session that was together. Mary and I attended multiple sessions, one on in-house professional development, one on growth data with LUDA districts, one on school funding, one on Illinois Balanced Assessment Model. So it was all practical and relevant. These February sessions usually have a lot to do with what's going on in Springfield and ISB and things like that. You probably know that the budget is based on what they're calling a grand bargain. It started out with 14 bills. It's down to 10, or down to 12, as I understand it currently, and it's falling apart rapidly. But I will be in Springfield again on Tuesday and Wednesday. Governor Rauner is going to speak. And so are Tony Smith from the State Board, et cetera. So I may have some updated information, but I really don't know what to expect. The session on the LUDA district growth metrics, the main point of that had to do with the fact that districts that typically have not had to pay as much attention to the impact of poverty on student achievement need to start doing that sooner rather than later, because a lot of that's affected in many districts' growth, student growth metrics. One of the things with the in-house professional development, we were broken out into a lot of different roundtables and moving around a little bit, but one of the people I was interacting with was from District 300 in Carpentersville, which is a very large district. And it was interesting because as we were talking about this, they are a district that does instructional rounds. So we were comparing notes on how they manage the process and some of the different types of things that they do. I'm sharing a little bit greater detail than I had in the board packet, just because one of you requested that I do so. So those are a couple things that provide a little bit maybe fuller picture of what went on. And then just from the principal's perspective, they really enjoyed the session on growth mindset. You've heard Mary talk about that. Can you just give a quick statement to growth mindset, just kind of remind them what we mean by that?
Sure. Growth mindset refers to how we support our students in helping them understand that intelligence isn't a fixed quantity or a fixed amount, that we always have that opportunity to learn and grow, and that just like a new sport you were learning or a new athletic skill, the more you practice, the more you persevere and stick with something, the more you're going to learn and achieve far greater things. So mindset is something our teachers have been working on with our students on a regular basis.
Then another thing that Jackie had referenced, they had breakout sessions by grade level span at one point, and the middle school session focused a lot on schedules and interventions, which is directly related to some of the work that we're doing with the middle school task force. She found some of that very helpful. Erin had referenced the session that they went to on utilizing online teacher evaluation systems, and that's one thing we're really trying to do is streamline our evaluation process, because our principals just are drowning in hours of paperwork. And we're piloting, well, we're not piloting, we made a commitment, you approved, to actually purchase an online evaluation tool. It's called, what's the name of it, Jim? Talent Ed. We went with Talent Ed. We were looking at a couple, I couldn't remember. That should help us a lot. So again, Erin thought that was particularly pertinent to some things, and we are starting some training with the principals later this spring for implementation for next year. And are we piloting that in a couple buildings this spring too? No, we put that off. Yeah, our principals were a little swamped. They said maybe we put that off a little bit. And then there was a session that Erin really liked a lot on cultural competencies. And one of the things that York is working on a lot is access, growth, increasing participation on traditionally underrepresented groups. And so again, that was a session that was pertinent specifically to some of the things they're working on at the high school there. So that's my report on LUDA.
Okay, thanks. Board communication. Are there any communications from board members? Okay. We have upcoming meetings. February 28th, Board of Education meeting, 7:30. Monday, March 6th, Finance and Operations Committee meeting at 7 o'clock. Thursday, March 9th, Learning and Teaching Committee meeting, 6:15. And one board meeting in March 21st, 7:30. We've reached the end of the agenda. I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thanks.